Everyone knows that even the most beautiful of weddings are kind of annoying. Even as a guest, they require a significant investment of both time and money. From requesting off work to complying with niche dress codes to clicking through dozens of expensive gift options before finally finding something on the couple's registry that says, "I may not be your richest friend, but I'm also not a total waste of your time." However, even the most inconvenient of modern-day nuptials with their cringy personalized vows, sand-merging ceremonies, cash bars, boy moms, and blacked-out uncles fighting in the parking lot pale in comparison to what befell one pair of newlyweds when they received from a guest not a set of matching Turkish bath towels, but murder. On this week's episode of Let's Get Haunted, we'll be exploring the era of the Italian Renaissance, a time when attitudes toward religion, superstition, society, and culture were all in transition, and a time where curses, death, paranoia, and murder were always just around the corner. Today, we delve into the story of the real-life Red Wedding of Perugia, also known as the Baglioni Family Massacre. A story of failed alliances, power grabs, cannibalism, and revenge.
Welcome back to Let's Get Haunted
with your host,
Nat Strawn
and Allie. Welcome back, Haunties, to episode 225 of Let's Get Haunted. We are your ghost hosts, Allie and Nat, but today we are your haunters, you are our hauntees, and we're here to get haunted. And we have a doozy prepared for you today. I did not think I was going to do an episode on this topic, and then I started writing it, and I was like, this is long as fuck. It has to be a regular episode, not a Patreon episode. So that's what we're doing today, and I hope you guys like it. But before we can get to that, we are uploading video to Spotify now. This is our first official Spotify video episode of July. And Nat, I would love if you could explain what our show is for anyone who might be new, because I think when you start uploading video to Spotify, maybe the algorithm does different things.
Yeah, you guys, if you clicked on this by accident, first of all, welcome. If it wasn't an accident, then also thank you. Our show is very haunted show. Now, I know you've heard other paranormal shows. I know you know everything there is about getting haunted, right? Wrong. We have trauma, and we deal with that by using humor. And so you'll find when listening to this podcast that we address a lot of very serious, very triggering topics with a very light heart. Some might say disrespectful, but you know what? I don't know. That's the only way I can get through. Okay. And also you might notice there's a huge difference between the host personalities. So if you get bored of one of us, then you're forced to listen to the other, and hopefully you'll like them more. So welcome to the podcast.
We've been doing this for 7 years now, just about. I think actually 6 years. This is our 7th season. It's like kind of like when you're talking about the 15th century, but it's actually the 1400s. You know, it's one of those things. The way that these episodes work, like Nat said, is that there are 2 of us. And so each episode we take turns telling each other haunted stories from around the world. And that means that Nat has no idea what I'm going to talk about today. And when it's her turn to tell an episode, I won't have any idea what she's talking about. And that's kind of fun because hopefully then we will be asking the questions that you might be asking yourself in real time as you're listening to the story for the first time.
Disclaimer, this is not a skeptic podcast, okay? We believe in whatever random bullshit. The fakest shit you've ever heard, we're going to pretend like it's real, and we're going to treat it like it's real. And we're not like going to budge from that. It doesn't matter how not logical it is. That's how we do it.
We're going to start off with 5 to 10 minutes of something we call personal hauntings, which Nat has already explained. I'm going to explain it again because sometimes when we're editing and post, we realize nothing we said makes sense. Personal hauntings are before we get to the titular story at hand that you can see in the title for this week's episode. We like to just chat amongst ourselves and talk about weird haunted shit going on in our personal lives. Sometimes it's literally a ghost, like you saw a sleep paralysis demon at the foot of your bed. Sometimes it's like, oh my God, I fell off a cliff and survived by a miracle. If you don't like that, that's okay. You can skip ahead to the next chapter. Otherwise, it's time for personal hauntings. Nat, do you have any personal hauntings to share with the class?
I do. It's actually been a good minute since Allie and I have gotten together. She was out of town for a really long time. I had to go out of town. Next month is going to be crazy again. So we're kind of like all discombobulated right now. And I haven't told Allie this major thing that happened to me. I had to go to the ER because I thought I had appendicitis. Basically, Chat GPT told me I needed to go to the ER. And
here we go. There, the truth comes out.
Yeah. And so then I asked Chat, I was like, but what if it's just gas? And they were like, honestly, if it's just gas, then it will be a relief, just go to the ER. And so I'm like, okay. So of course I go to triage at the Atlanta, like whatever ER. And guess who the guy that has to put like the IV on me and like all that, like you go in and you like talk to someone and they do like your initial blood work and whatever before they take you back. It was the fucking Ford model. He had just moved from LA. He was like 7 foot tall, like sculpted fucking face, like had like a cool streak of gray hair. Like it was horrible. I wanted to kill myself. And he was like, yeah, so, you think you have like appendicitis? And I was like, or gas, and I was just like trying to like be cool, but at the same time, like I was hurting. You guys, I'm married with children. Doesn't mean I can't also be awkward in front of a hot person, okay? They did like this MRI. They put like this, what is it called? Like a dye in me or something. And they saw my intestines and my cecum, which is like this gross thing that connects to your appendix or whatever, were like all swollen. So it was everything that connects to the appendix, I guess. And so the doctor comes in and he's talking to me and he's like, me and the gastrologist looked at this for a very long time. And he says it's not appendicitis, but he's not really sure what it is because this is very inflamed. And then they brought out this like plastic bowl. It's called a hat. And they were like, will you poop in this hat? And I was just like, do I have to? And they were like, well, technically you don't have to do anything. And I was like, okay, well then I'm not. I'm just going to leave now because I'm not pooping in this this thing. And he just wouldn't stop saying poop. He was like, so once you go poop in this, then I'll take the poop out and I'll put it in like a container and then we'll look at the poop and I was just like, stop saying poop. God. The hot person's there. I just was like, I couldn't do it. So I was like, you know what? I'm leaving. We're done. It's not life-threatening, hopefully. And I just like was like, yeah, I'll go see a specialist tomorrow, whatever. And then I just never did. And I just took whatever antibiotics they gave me. And like, I guess maybe it was an infection. Maybe I'm deathly allergic to something. I don't know. But I was not going to poop in that thing to find out. I would rather die than do that. So that's my personal haunting.
First of all, that is definitely a personal haunting. Second of all, I know exactly what you're talking about when you said poop in the hat, because one time I was asked to poop in those little plastic toilet things, and I did not do it. And then the plastic toilet thing, they were like, well, just take it home, and like you could do it in the comfort of your own home, and then keep the poop in the fridge in a bag, and then you could bring it in later. And I was like, absolutely not. So I just left the little plastic toilet thing in the back seat of my truck for like forever, because I just kept thinking, I'll throw it out later. I'll throw it out later. I'll throw it out. But like, you don't necessarily want to like just take out a plastic toilet from the back seat of your car and throw it out in front of people. So I just like never did it. And then one time you and I were recording at the location of our old studio and we heard someone breaking into my truck and you and I sprinted down there and luckily nothing was stolen. But to this day, I'm convinced it's because the only thing visible was the poop toilet thing. This week's episode is sponsored by Factor. Summer is here. More sun, more light, more time to do all the things that make summer so special. And the number one thing you don't want to be doing this summer, other than avoiding certain death at a wedding that's supposed to merge two sides of your family together to stamp out a centuries-old beef, is spending hours inside cooking. That's where Factor comes in. Factor's chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals are ready in just 2 minutes, taking the hassle out of eating well. Factor meals arrive fresh and ready to eat, perfect for any active lifestyle over summer and beyond. With 45 weekly menu options, you can pick gourmet meals that fit your summer gains and goals. Choose from options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto, and more. Factor powers your day sun up to sundown. With nutritious breakfasts, on-the-go lunches, premium dinners, and guilt-free snacks and desserts, Factor has your whole day covered. Enjoy more of this summer. Get Factor if you want all the flavor and none of the fuss. I want to be buff like Nat. I want to have strong arms and ride a horse, and if I fall off, have the certainty that I won't die. And one of the ways I'm doing that is through Factor's Smoothie Variety Pack. I really enjoy Factor Smoothie Variety Pack because they're all really delicious, and I use them as a meal replacement sometimes in the morning when it's too busy, and I'm trying to get my daily dose of fruit because I love fruit, but it also is perishable and it goes bad really fast. And I feel like I'm constantly going to the store and buying fruit or produce in general, and then it just goes bad before I can eat it. Want to be like me and Nat and also make sure our show doesn't get dropped and canceled by everyone who's ever worked with us? Get started at factormeals.com/letsgethaunted50 and use code letsgethaunted50 to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. That's code letsgethaunted50 at factormeals.com/letsgethaunted50 for 50% off plus free shipping. Factormeals.com/letsgethaunted50. And now back to your regularly scheduled haunting. Very haunted. Thank you for sharing your tale of not pooping in a hat. Would you like to move on
Let's go.
to the haunting at hand? Was that a yes?
Yeah, I consent.
So today's story is going to be a little different than the types of stories we usually cover on here because, for those of you who don't know, we have a Patreon. And this year, I have been doing these things called Allie's Miniature Hauntings, where I will take a story that's not long enough for the full hour and a half to 2 hour episode of the regular show, and I'll do like less than 20 minutes on it. So this started as a Allie's Miniature Haunting. I realized it was too long. So now it is a full-blown episode. So if you guys liked this type of episode, definitely go subscribe to our Patreon. I've been uploading those occasionally. I don't really have a set schedule yet on Tier 1. Okay, here we go. Part 1, the Italian Renaissance. In the 15th century, Italy became the epicenter of art, architecture, and humanist philosophy in the midst of what is now referred to as the Renaissance period. Bursting from the darkened shadows of the Middle Ages, the Renaissance swapped religious authority for the pursuit of earthly pleasures and the exploration of what it truly means to be a human. It was an exciting time to be in the burgeoning Italian art scene, as visionaries like Sandro Botticelli and Michelangelo crafted priceless works that pushed the movement forward through paintings and sculptures such as The Birth of Venus and the Pietà, respectively. While the art and philosophy of the Middle Ages focused solely on the afterlife, the Renaissance challenged its participants to look at the present and to ask, what can an individual achieve for himself during his lifetime? The period was also characterized by a voracious interest in classical literature. So much so that it led German Johannes Gutenberg to invent the printing press in 1440. As books became more accessible, Europeans everywhere began to realize that the translations of the Bible they had grown up with were riddled with errors and, in some cases, mistranslations or lies. This in turn led to a movement of finding and translating ancient tomes, to the point where owning antiques in general became a status symbol. The size of each classical library a visual representation of just how wealthy, powerful, and important its owner was. Renaissance Italy was also a time of fractured political power. In the 15th century, Italy wasn't a single country like it is today. Instead, it was a collection of independent city-states, each with its own government, military, and ambitions. The most powerful of these were Florence, Milan, Venice, the Kingdom of Naples, and the Papal States, which were ruled by the Pope. These five were constantly competing with each other for land, power, and influence, creating a tense and often violent political atmosphere. Alliances could shift overnight, and warfare was common. Florence, for example, was officially a republic, but in reality it was controlled by the Medici family, rich bankers who influenced politics from behind the scenes. Cosimo de' Medici, and later his grandson Lorenzo, nicknamed the Magnificent, were not kings, but they were treated with similar respect and fear. Florence became a hub for art and culture thanks in large part to Medici money supporting artists like Botticelli and Michelangelo. Milan was a powerful duchy that changed hands in the mid-1400s from the Visconti family to the Sforza family, both of whom were known for their military skill. Venice, unlike the others, was a stable and rich trading republic with a strong navy and a conservative ruling class. The Papal States were ruled directly by the Pope, who acted more like a political leader than a purely religious figure. Popes during this period weren't shy about going to war or giving out positions of power to their family members. Meanwhile, southern Italy, known as the Kingdom of Naples, was weaker and often caught in the middle of rivalries between the northern powers. It also drew interest from foreign rulers in France and Spain, who each wanted a piece of it. In many ways, this was the original era of the attention whore, with self-expression and individualism eclipsing the traditional roles of the religion-focused social dynamics that came before it. We see echoes of Renaissance philosophy in all areas of Italian life during this period, so it comes as no surprise that weddings, too, became opportunities to flaunt personal achievement and importance. One of the ways this manifested itself was through a combination of weird wedding gifts and over-the-top traditions. Natalia, what do you know about Renaissance Italy?
Yeah, when I think Renaissance Italy, I think gold, ornate, beautiful paintings with like the Sistine Chapel, right? Like that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's like there was like an aesthetic that was kind of popular. I don't know, maybe 2020, maybe 2019, where it was like very much Renaissance Italy, almost like Baroque style. Remember, like everyone just had like the background of their cell phone was like Michelangelo or something. Like everyone was wearing like Renaissance paintings and stuff. You guys, I don't know about anything. I'm just using the only information I know to try to relate. Ali just asked me like a scientific academic question. Truth is, I don't know dick. I don't know shit about history or anything. So, you happy?
You led me into a very good transition here because, like I said, in many ways, the Renaissance period was kind of the me era. Like, it's all about me. In the same way that in 2020, we had influencers buying clothing that had these beautiful Renaissance paintings on it, like cherubs, God, God's finger pointing at another guy. Someone's dick is like photoshopped out of it because that would be weird on your clothes. But like, yeah, definitely. I think that it was a period of time that had this shift, this cultural shift happening, because whereas before it was all about trying to live a righteous life so that you go to heaven and what can God do for you, when we come to the Renaissance, people are starting to read the Bible, translate it themselves, and realize like, hey, some of this stuff that we were being taught doesn't really make any sense, and they start criticizing the teachings of the previous era. And in Italy especially, where they did not have a centralized Italian government yet at this point, there were all these different factions and city-states that had a lot of money in them, and they're all competing with each other. So they start pouring a lot of their money and resources into the humanist movement, which was basically where they're like, hey, guy, you're a very talented painter. I'm going to give you a bunch of money so that all you're doing is painting. Hey, philosopher, you're really smart. I'm going to give you a bunch of money so that all you're doing is coming up with new ideas. And so they were competing with each other and sometimes at war with each each other, sometimes trying to take over each other. Meanwhile, this whole type of culture of competition is fueling opulence, is fueling consumerism in a way, because people are like, oh my God, if I can get my hands on these ancient Roman tomes or versions of it, then now I'm going to look super cool. I've got all these antiques in my library. And so that means I'm super important and rich and learned. And isn't that cool? And so that attitude bled over into not just the arts and clothing, but also into traditions. And that takes us to part 2, 15th century Italian wedding traditions. Due to the political and cultural landscape of this era, many weddings during the Renaissance were based on business rather than love, with families negotiating marriage terms based on land, money, and power. Noble and wealthy families arranged marriages to secure alliances, expand their influence, or even settle disputes. A marriage between the daughter of a powerful Florentine family and the son of a Milanese duke, for example, could help avoid war or open up trade routes between the two locations. Even the Pope was known to marry off nieces or nephews to gain allies. Women usually found themselves used as pawns in these deals, married off at young ages to much older men in return for land, money, or promises of protection, and wedding celebrations were public displays of wealth and power, with parades, feasts, and processions meant to impress both allies and rivals. Since these marriages were transactional in nature and formed alliances between what might otherwise be considered rival groups, it was not uncommon for violence and fighting to break out during the festivities. This became such a problem in Florence, for example, that a statute had to be passed in 1415, which made it illegal to throw stones and garbage at the happy couple.
Ooh, damn. You know what this is reminding me of? Jeff Bezos' wedding just happened in Venice. Did you
Oh my God,
see
so true.
see that or anything?
I've seen some stuff on Reddit, like slideshows of people putting together the best or worst moments, depending on your perspective, of the wedding. And yeah, it's very
It's kind of
ostentatious.
It's kind of reminding me of what you're talking about, though, because we have like a huge display of wealth and power. Like so much of that wedding was just like how like over the top can we be, essentially. And then there was like a bunch of people protesting and throwing stuff and, you know, on some 1500 stuff, I guess you could say.
And I think that's actually a good analogy because Bezos is a super rich and powerful guy. So now imagine if you had a Jeff Bezos of the 1400s and a Lauren Sanchez of the 1400s, and maybe she's part of one city-state and he's part of another, and their families are like, okay, we want to merge kingdoms, or at least maybe not merge, but we want to open up some trade routes. We want to ensure peace between these two city-states because historically we've always been fighting with each other. So I give you Lauren Sanchez and I give you Jeff Bezos, and now they merge and we're going to have the craziest over-the-top wedding celebration that lasts multiple days with banners and horses and music and dancing and fireworks. That way everybody knows.
Yeah.
Like everybody in these two regions are like, oh my God, we're friends now.
Right.
We're not fighting. Look at this. And so that was also part of the reason of why it was so over the top during the Renaissance era. And it was also kind of creepy. After the nuptials had been completed, newlyweds would sometimes be led to a bed by guests or family members as part of a quote unquote bedding ceremony.
Wait, to
Then
fuck?
yes, because a marriage was not considered legitimate if there was no consummation. So as part of this bedding ceremony, family and friends would either guide the groom and bride to the bed and then leave them alone to consummate the marriage in private, or in some freakier examples, guests would listen in, or they would even watch on some rare occasions as the couple banged it out for the first time.
You know that, like, I just have to wonder, like, how awkward is, because I'm assuming, I don't know if this to be true, but I'm assuming that people probably didn't have sex until they were married, right? Like, if you're, like, from that time period, right? So this is essentially two people, or at least one person. I'm assuming the woman would have to be a virgin, right? This is someone losing their virginity. So it's like gotta be kind of awkward, right? They're like, ooh, like let's listen in, and it's just like someone crying, and then someone else is like, it's okay, it's fine. It's not going in. Is it supposed to be? Don't spit on me, like things like that.
Yeah, definitely super uncomfortable. This didn't always happen, but there were examples of times where like like people would watch on to make sure that it really was taking place. And if it wasn't family and friends, then it was at least servants, usually, in case like, do you need anything, my lord? And sometimes there would be people from the family in the room, but they would kind of put a partition between them and the bed so that they're like, we're here, we're making sure you're consummating, but you have your privacy. But then I also think about that time period in general. I bet there was almost no privacy.
Yeah.
Just in general. Like, you're probably shitting in front of each other, you're banging in front of each other. It probably was just people had less of a concept of privacy back then.
It feels weird.
Yeah, it's for sure weird. And on rare occasions, bloody sheets proving both the bride's virginity and the pair's successful copulation were then paraded around for all to admire. And that was super, super rare. I could only find a couple examples of that. But the fact that it was happening at all is kind
alarming.
of crazy.
That obviously could have... I mean, what would you do if it was your period, though? And it's like the night of your marriage is your period. Would you just like put sponges up there or something and hope it didn't come out, or...
No, I think you would probably be pumped because then you're like, oh, look, I am a virgin.
Oh, yeah.
Look, there's all this blood. I think that some people, I mean, not to go too in depth here and be gross, but like, you know, some people don't bleed their first time.
Some people have got a big ass vagina. I think I'm one of those people because I remember when I lost my virginity, the guy was like, you're lying. You're not a virgin. And I was like, yeah, I am a virgin. And he was like, no, you're not a virgin. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm in love with you now. So. And, you know, look, some vaginas were built tough, right? Like Ford, built tough, built to last. That's the one that you want. I don't know why everyone wants this one that's like real fat, fragile, and like gets hurt. You know, you want one that's like a bucket. It's just sturdy. It's going to last a lifetime.
I think you would have done well during the Renaissance because there was no birth control and you needed a strong vagina wife in order to have your children and carry on your lineage. But speaking of deflowering, we can't discuss 15th century weddings without addressing something called cassoni. The cassone was a chest or pair of chests given to a bride on her wedding day, used for storing her trousseau, but symbolically marking the transfer of a woman as property from her father to her husband. And if you don't know what trousseau means, neither did I, and it's basically the collection of personal items a bride brings with her into her marriage. Traditionally, it would include clothing, lingerie, linens, and sometimes jewelry or household goods, basically everything she would need to start her new life. In Renaissance Italy, these items were often stored in an ornate chest called the cassone, or in plural, the cassoni, that symbolized her family's wealth. Placed in the bridal suite for the couple's first night together, cassoni were lavishly decorated with provocative imagery, fertility symbols, nude figures, or, in more sinister cases, violent narratives meant to instruct, intimidate, or control. One of the most disturbing real-life examples of the type of art used for these trunks comes from a cassone commissioned by a nobleman for his son's wedding. This nobleman is thought to have been a member of the powerful Medici family, who had strong political ties in 1400s Florence. The story goes that when this nobleman's son was to be wed, he paid famed Renaissance artist Sandro Botticelli to paint panels of scenes based on a story from the Decameron. He asked that these panels be created in the style of a cassone so that he could gift it to his son's new wife. The Decameron was a collection of 100 stories compiled by Renaissance author Giovanni Boccaccio, and the story that Medici chose to commission paintings of is a grotesque and haunted doozy. It tells a gothic, supernatural story of unrequited love, suicide, and eternal punishment. In the story, a young nobleman named Nastasio falls in love with a girl from a different noble family. To get her attention, he squanders away his money on lavish parties and banquets thrown just to court her attention. But rather than be impressed, the young woman continuously rejects Nastasio. With his dream of marrying the woman crumbling around him, he falls into a deep depression and unsuccessfully attempts suicide several times. Hitting rock bottom, Nastasio decides to move to the next town over in an attempt to forget about the woman and move on with his life. One evening, while on a walk in a pine forest, Nastasio is taken by surprise when a naked woman sprints past him in the woods, sobbing as she runs. Nipping at her heels are two monstrous fanged dogs foaming at the mouth as they try to bite her. Behind the dogs emerges a knight wielding a black sword, clearly in hot pursuit to kill the naked woman. Horrified, Nastasio attempts to intervene, yelling to the knight that he must stop at once. But the knight calmly explains that Nastasio's attempt is futile because what he is witnessing is actually a supernatural scene of not people, but ghosts. The knight explains that he was driven to suicide after the woman he is chasing rejected his advances. When the woman eventually also died, she was cursed to be hunted in the afterlife by the knight on a loop for all of eternity. Every Friday, she was cursed to run naked through the woods as the knight chased her. Eventually, the knight would catch her, stab her, and disembowel her as punishment for rejecting him. Understanding that he cannot intervene on the scene, Nastasio watches as the knight once again brutally murders the girl. However, rather than being horrified, Nastasio gets a brilliant burst of inspiration. He should throw one last party in these very woods next Friday night and invite the young woman who had rejected him. At the party, he takes the woman to the section of the woods where this ghostly scene is cursed to play out for all of eternity, and as his crush watches a knight disembowel his jilted lover, the meaning to her is clear. She must marry Nastasio or risk the same fate. Seeing no way out, she then marries Nastasio, because there's nothing like the implied threat of torture and murder to get a woman to love you, am I right, fellas? This gross scene was then painted on a series of panels and gifted as part of a cassone, or marital trunk, for the wedding of the son of a nobleman. This example shows the dark history of the Renaissance wedding tradition of gifting cassone to new brides painted with violent artwork on them.
That feels like a threat. That feels like
It is.
You have to marry my son or you're gonna get murdered by a knight.
Yeah, there were definitely undertones of that. Some cassone weren't that insane. Like sometimes they would just kind of have like pretty filigree carved into them, or they would have like a nude reclined woman painted on the interior of the cassone. So you go into your marital suite and you open up the cassone where all of your linens and clothes and dishes and everything you're bringing into the marriage is, and then only you in the privacy of your bedroom can see this like very seductive naked woman painted on the inside. And so it's supposed to like get you in the mood, like ancient porn, right? Like they didn't have the internet. They weren't pulling up Girls Gone Wild to get them in the mood. It was like this very refined painting of a naked woman, or sometimes it would be a naked woman being disemboweled by the lover she rejected. And yeah, the undertone is creepy. It's like, hey, you might be really uncomfortable in this situation, because often it was young women getting married to older men for political alliances, but like, look at what might happen to you if you say no. Like, look what has happened to people in the past if they say no, even though it was a fictional story, obviously. Like the guy didn't really see a ghost in the woods, or did he? We don't know. But yeah, it's supposed to be a fictional story.
Yeah, I don't like that. I get excited by the thought of like a cute little trunk, like ornate, like someone had like little like carpenter tools, and they like had to go like chop a tree down and like measure things and like screw little things. You know, like I like the artisan vibes of it, right? Like the handmade, like a handmade trunk, like, you know, that to me is exciting. I like this idea, but I'm just thinking about it and I'm like, what a bummer it would be if like your trunk was not slay.
Or was literally slay. There's a guy killing someone on it.
Yeah.
I'm going to send you two examples of cassone so that you can describe them to the audience.
Oh my God, you guys, this is so cute. Okay, so these are big ornate trunks, and I was thinking like a treasure trunk. No, these are like really long and wide. You know what? They almost look like something you would keep like a sarcophagus in or something, like a body, you know? And so this first one I'm looking at, yeah, it's beautiful, and it has like oil paintings on it, and then on the lid is a naked guy in like a loincloth, and then the next one is, yep, beautiful scene, horses, people doing Renaissance stuff, and then, you know, on the lid is a naked woman reclining. And yeah, it is. These are so cool.
Well, it's interesting you say they're big enough to fit a body, because they are. And cassoni have been the subject of centuries of ghost stories, the most famous of which is that of the ghost bride of Bram Williams Hill house. In that story, an Italian bride accidentally finds herself trapped inside her marital chest during a game of hide and seek. When none of the guests can find her, they assume she ran off and give up the hunt. Trapped in the trunk, the bride eventually suffocates to death. Her skeleton, still dressed in her wedding gown, is then found decades later inside the locked cassone, with the withered remains of her bouquet clutched tightly in her hands. And in that episode 205, it takes place in the UK, but the lore is that this trunk that this Italian woman died in was then, sold to somebody in the UK that kept it at a house, and that haunting followed the trunk to the house.
Yeah, wow, that's crazy because I remember that story and I didn't realize that this cassone was the marital trunk. Wow. Okay, so I am remembering things. I am retaining information. I'm learning. I'm progressing. Okay, let's go.
Also, isn't the story of Nastasio, until you get to the part about disemboweling your lover, isn't that story kind of similar to The Great Gatsby, where he's throwing all these lavish parties for this girl that's not interested in him, but he just doesn't get that even though she's showing up, that it doesn't mean he's going to get her in the end, right?
Well, we had really different takes on The Great Gatsby.
Oh.
That's what you thought The Great Gatsby was? Wow.
Yes, Daisy Buchanan loved the attention she was getting, but she was never going to go for him because he was new money. She wanted to be with her old money guy that was kind of boring. She kind of sucked for sure in the stories. Yeah. And then here's Gatsby not realizing, not picking up the hints.
I love
He should have given up years ago.
This has got me kind of thinking, okay, so I love that. I love the trope of the man who's obsessed with this girl and he just buys her whatever she wants and she can do no wrong. Even though she's kind of a cunt, he's going to continue to beg for her and just constantly humiliate himself and put her on a pedestal, right? I adore. That is my ideal situation. Okay, so I'm wondering, what if the cassone is kind of a kink thing? What if it was sort of a fantasy? It was consensual, where it was consensual, non-consensual sort of, you know what I mean?
Usually they were commissioned by your parents though.
So what if that's part of it? What if it's I'm the son, you're marrying me, my dad is also kind of turned on by you, and this is this gross weird thing. Welcome to our family, slut.
Highly probable, especially in the cases where the dad would be watching his son consummate. There's some weird stuff for sure happening there, so it would not surprise me. But these legends surrounding marital trunks being connected to ghost stories are not found in a vacuum. 15th century Italians also subscribed to a nearly endless list of wedding superstitions, most of which were aimed at preventing evil spirits from interfering with the day. Marriage wasn't just a union of families or an expression of love. It was also a cosmic event that demanded spiritual safeguards. Anything too joyful, too lavish, or too beautiful were thought to tempt fate, or worse, attract unwanted attention from forces beyond the veil. To ward off these lurking dangers, couples and their families turned to a variety of folk rituals. For example, some regions called for the groom to carry a piece of iron in his pocket during the ceremony to protect against il malocchio. Natalia, do you want to explain to people what malocchio is? Because you've talked about it before in the past.
What? It's a bad spirit? What?
It translates to evil eye.
Oh.
You did a whole episode on malocchio.
Girl, you guys, I don't know how many times I have to say this. I'm not smart, okay? I've said it a million times, right? Look, don't hate the player, hate the game. I do remember, okay, Evil Eye. Yeah, I do remember we did the episode on Colabraro. I did the episode.
Thank you. I was about to say, episode 62, Colabraro, Italy's most cursed village.
Yeah.
Nat talked about a secretive village in Italy, home to werewolves, ghosts, witches, evil eye curses, and bad luck. And in that episode, we learned about malocchio, which translates to evil eye.
Okay.
It was believed to be, go for it.
Yeah, so malocchio is where someone gets really jealous of you or they're envious of you, and that energy of them being jealous turns into a negative curse that they put on you without even realizing. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes the malocchio is oh, I see that person just got a new cart, fuck them, I hope their cart falls apart, Or sometimes it's like, oh man, that person has a cart. Ugh, I wish I could have a cart. I'll never have a cart. Everyone else in the neighborhood has a cart except me. And then like that, like sadness brews up, or that jealousy like brews up, and it like creates a curse. Kind of like in Harry Potter when like in the beginning he doesn't really know how to use his powers, and he'll just have like bad thoughts, and it'll like, things will just happen to people around him and he doesn't understand why. That's kind of like what Malocchio is. And so I guess the idea would be like, you kind of don't want to attract the evil eye. You don't want to be envied by people because they'll curse you without realizing it.
Yes, exactly right. So that concept that you just described, which is that Malocchio doesn't have to be intentional, becomes really tricky when we're talking about Renaissance weddings, because we just learned that they were ostentatious displays of wealth. Yeah. They were long. They took place over multiple days. The whole town would be decorated if it was between two really important noblemen, or if it was forming an alliance between two regions, then there would take place at a palace maybe. And so there were tricks to try to avoid the evil eye. It was said to cause bad luck, illness, infertility, or sudden misfortune, especially to children, animals, and anyone beautiful, fortunate, rich, or enviably happy, which obviously explains why Let's Get Haunted will never reach mainstream success. But since lavish weddings and joyful couples might unintentionally invite the evil eye's wrath, equally superstitious remedies sprang up to block or confuse it. And I do want to say, in case there's any Italian listeners still listening, that in Italy, apparently pretty much nobody believes in Malocchio anymore. Italian Americans, I have heard though, are different. A lot of Italian Americans do believe in the evil eye. I was going through all of these message boards, like r/Italians, r/Italian Americans, r/Italy, like all these different message boards and threads where people from Italy were like, nobody believes in this unless they're really dumb or really old. And then Italian Americans were like, hey, I live in New York, forget about it, it's real. And so they were like kind of at odds with each other in that way. But back during the Renaissance period, it very much was still believed in.
Look, if the Jersey Shore cast says that Malocchio is real, I believe them. So
yeah, there's no one more trustworthy than the situation. Yeah. So like we said, since obviously there were lots of opportunities for people to be envious during these lavish weddings, there were a lot of remedies that sprang up to try to counteract that bad energy. One of which was carrying iron, which we already talked about. Another one was sewing garlic into your bridal gown, or tucking wolfsbane into your bouquets, or burning juniper in the marriage chamber. And brides wore veils not just for modesty, but also to obscure their identities from jealous spirits. In some towns, the bride might even be passed through a ring of iron or a hoop of laurel branches before stepping inside the church as a form of protection. For those with wealth, the solution was even simpler. All they had to do was make their weddings even bigger. It seems like it would be a paradox, but it's not. It's not counterintuitive, because Renaissance weddings were these massive public affairs with music, dancing, parades. It was all about showing off, but it was also believed that the larger the crowd, the more difficult it would be for the evil spirits to locate the bride and groom among the masses. Now, do we think that that is true, or do we think it was an excuse to just be even more over the top and obnoxious with your displays of wealth? I don't know.
Well, okay, if the evil eye is real, then it kind of makes sense, right? Because if you have like a huge guest list and there's all these really beautiful, successful people there, that you are going to look less envious, right? It's sort of like spreading it out versus like just on you.
Okay, wait. Okay, now going to modern day conspiracy, back to the Jeff Bezos wedding. Is that why people were talking about, like, why is Sydney Sweeney here? He clearly doesn't know her. Why are the Kardashians here, but they left right after the ceremony and didn't stick around? Why is Leonardo DiCaprio here with his hat pulled over his eyes, looking like he doesn't want to be there? Could it be that they were paid to be there to spread out the Malocchio?
Oh, it could be. Okay, I actually have, well, I have some tea, actually, some tea about this, but maybe we'll talk about it in a Patreon episode.
Say it.
Okay, so.
No, say it.
Okay, so you guys, I can't explain why I'm thinking about this. I have ADHD. If you believe in that's real, maybe that's the reason. Okay, a long time ago, Allie and I were roommates, and we had a roommate, and it was someone who was much older than us, and they worked in like the art industry, like doing stuff. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to give away these identities, okay? This is all alleged, right? They told me that they were working on something where it was going to be huge. Don't tell anyone about it, but Lady Gaga was going to go to space during her Coachella performance. And
What?
yeah, and it was going to be this big deal, and she was going to perform, like literally like take off to space. And then like it was going to be cameras on her, and then she was going to land at Coachella and like continue the concert or whatever. And it was going to be crazy,
What
huge.
the fuck?
Now, recall this year, Lady Gaga performed at Coachella, but she did not go to space. Instead, Katy Perry went to space. Recall? Remember? Right?
Yes.
And I think
Yeah.
what happened is that 10 years ago, when I heard about this plan of Lady Gaga's going to do this or whatever, probably like the public sentiment about like a celebrity going to space was like, oh, that's going to be so iconic. That's so cool. Right. But now, like, it doesn't really go along with like Lady Gaga's image to be like associated with Jeff Bezos going to space or whatever. But so Katy Perry, I think, took her spot. And that's why Katy
Oh.
Perry went up there, right? And then here's where shit gets even more crazy, okay? My next theory is that Orlando Bloom and Katy Perry broke up recently, okay? But I think they've actually been broke up for a very long time, and Katy was just waiting to tease that information out until closer to this wedding, and then that's why they weren't there together at the wedding. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, that is some piping hot tea. And Orlando Bloom was also photographed
With
with
Sydney
Sydney
Sweeney,
Sweeney.
yeah.
And everyone was like, this is so random. They clearly don't know each other. Like, why are they here? I don't know. Maybe Jeff Bezos knows something we don't know, and he thought it would be great to have other enviable people around to spread the blame.
Well, listen to Let's Get Haunted. You're getting the inside scoop about things that don't matter at all.
Back to the story. Of course, even the most elaborate of protections weren't always enough, because when a wedding went wrong in Renaissance Italy, it went very, very wrong. And nowhere is that more obvious than in this next story, the real-life red wedding of Perugia. Natalia, did you ever watch Game of Thrones back in the day?
Yeah, I did. And I know about the red wedding. Is this where the idea comes from?
Tell me about the red wedding in Game of Thrones, because everyone says that the story I'm about to tell you was one of the inspirations, but I never watched Game of Thrones, so I want to know.
Okay, shit. God, you fucking nerds are gonna be like, that's not what the red wedding was. Okay, this could be, I could be wrong, but spoiler alert, guys.
2 hours later.
That's what the red wedding is, I think, right?
I don't know because I
And
never saw it,
Khaleesi-
but what I'm looking at says it's not that.
No, then what am I thinking?
I just sent you a summary if you want to refresh your memory.
I don't even know any of these names.
So apparently the Red Wedding is one of the most iconic scenes in all of the series of Game of Thrones, which, if you don't know, was a popular TV series and also the subject of a series of books written by George R.R. Martin. And in the Red Wedding, there is a very violent, almost like a coup that takes place during a wedding, where during what should be a very happy event, a bunch of people end up dead. And a lot of people think that the inspiration for the Red Wedding episode comes from this next story.
Ooh.
Part 3, The Red Wedding. Also known as the Baglioni Massacre, the Red Wedding of Perugia is considered one of the most infamous cases of a wedding gone wrong to come out of the Renaissance period. To understand what happened, we first need to understand the key players in the story, the Baglioni family. At the time, the city of Perugia in central Italy was ruled by the Baglioni family, who were one of the most powerful families in the region. But like many wealthy and powerful families during the Renaissance, the Baglioni had a lot of internal fighting. Different branches of the family competed for control of the city, and even cousins and uncles didn't trust each other. They were all technically on the same side, but behind closed doors, they were constantly plotting against each other. At the center of the family at this time was a man named Gianpaolo Baglioni. He was a strong military leader and basically ran the city himself, even though other family members wanted their share of the power. Giampaolo was young, ambitious, and good at war, and he also had a reputation for being very ruthless. Many of his relatives, especially the older ones, were jealous or afraid of how quickly he was rising, and some thought that he was taking over the family and therefore the city completely and would soon be kicking everyone else out of the picture. One of the people who had a big problem with Giampaolo was a younger cousin named Griffonetto Baglioni. He was handsome, popular, rich, connected, and possessed the Baglioni name. But since he was from a different branch of the family tree, he felt that he was left out from political opportunities. Basically, he believed that Giampaolo was stealing power that rightfully belonged to him. And during the Renaissance, power was everything. Encouraged by the final boss of boy moms and a weird uncle constantly telling him he was special, Griffonetto was at the center of many family feuds and was constantly picking fights with the other family branches who he perceived as having more opportunities than him. Griffonetto was so loud about his hatred and jealousy for his cousin Giampaolo that the elders of these two branches of the family decided to intervene and arrange a marriage that would put the feud to bed. The idea was that if the two branches intermarried, they might finally see themselves as being one and the same. The bride and groom chosen to be wed were from two different sections of the Baglioni family tree, and the marriage was meant to be a symbol of unity. Astore Baglioni was selected to be the groom, who, by all accounts, was very well liked during this time period. We know so much about Astore because there was an author living in Perugia who thought that Astore was hot. The author was a scholar by the name of either Matarazzo or Maturanzio. We're not quite sure what his name was, but we'll be calling him Matarazzo for the purpose of this story. Matarazzo was like an ancient version of People magazine. He would follow the Baglioni boys around town, writing about what hijinks they were getting into, and in one of his writings, he describes a battle that Astore Baglioni fought in September of 1495. According to Matarazzo, an exiled faction called the Odi broke down the gates of Perugia in an attempt to take over the city. Catching the town by surprise, nobody was ready to fight, except for an 18-year-old member of the Baglioni family named Simonetto. Simonetto couldn't even grow facial hair yet, and all he was wearing was a shirt. But he ran outside his house, dick and balls blowing in the wind, and started slashing at the Odi faction with his sword. While Simonetto was going apeshit, Astore had grabbed his armor, his steed, and his sword and galloped over to do some fighting of his own. Simonetto had already killed a few people himself, but he was bleeding heavily due to 22 stab wounds that the Odi had inflicted upon him.
Oh my god.
Astore charged to his rescue wearing the family crest, which was a falcon with a dragon's tail, and told Simonetto to fall back and get help. Matarazzo described what happened next like something out of the legends of King Arthur. Astore was struck by so many weapons that it was like metal pounding on an anvil. His enemies were attacking in such huge numbers that they got in each other's way. So many lances, spears, crossbow bolts, and other weapons hit his body and armor that their clanging was louder than the rest of the battle noise. But Astore, a master of warfare, charged into the thickest part of the fight, knocking down enemy soldiers left and right with at least 10 men crushed under his horse's hooves at any time. His horse was wild and aggressive, doing as much damage as Astore himself. Eventually, both horse and rider were exhausted and dripping with sweat, barely able to breathe. Soon, the rest of the Baglioni family arrived and also joined the fight. One by one, their warriors came out from their palaces. They drove the attackers out of the city, killing many. The scene was even used as an inspiration for two paintings by the famous Italian Renaissance artist Raphael in his works Saint George and the Expulsion of Heliodorus. I'm going to send you those paintings now while you talk about how cool it is that a guy ran out half naked to kill a bunch of people.
Yeah, look, I know I'm not supposed to fantasize about other people dying because I'm sure they have their own life story and stuff, but to me they're just pawns in the story of this hot man with his huge dick and balls hanging out slitting their throats. There is a weird twisted part of me that is very much I actually don't think it's that weird. Don't sex and violence light up the same part of the brain or something like that, and that's why certain people are into BDSM or whatever? I'm gonna say that's true. I think that's true.
I don't know, but that sounds right.
Yeah. like, I think you can go too far with it. Like, I think you can get into like real serial killer territory and be like, it turns me on to cut the skin, you know? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like, you know, the occasional slap, maybe like a little sword play, like when you get out your steed, and and I think it's fine. I think it's good, and great talk, guys. Okay, so now Allie sent me these 3 images of, oh wow, this is cool. Wait, he's literally slaying like a dragon. Okay, there's a guy on a very fat, robust horse, and he is like fighting an actual like demon dragon. And then there's this other one, and this is very beautiful, and yep, it's a battle is going on, but it's like a battle, but it's also like, I'm dying, you know what I mean? Like everyone is like so aesthetic, like everyone's like so, I don't know, like just ethereal, like they're dying, but they're like beautifully dying. Yeah, these are gorgeous. And who did you say painted these?
Raphael.
Oh yeah.
So he was a painter in the region of Perugia. And like we talked about it at the beginning, one of the reasons why Renaissance art and the humanist movement was so pushed is because all of these different warring city-states were funding their own art and studies and philosophy so that they could be the best. Yeah. And so the Baglionis had commissioned Raphael multiple times for different paintings, and he was also very aware of the legends of the Baglioni family. And so even though these paintings aren't specifically of this fight that I just described to you, this battle I just described to you, Raphael heard the story. I mean, it was huge. It was like people were like, oh my God, Simonetto, he ran out with his dick and he stabbed people and he's not even old enough to shave yet. He's a teenager, like he just turned 18. But look at him, he's so proud and everything. And then, oh, Astore ran out to help him. What a brave guy. He was on his fat horse and he had his long sword that could be seen as an extension of his penis, and he slayed. And then because the guy was so hot, like Astore was said to be so attractive. Like most people in the Baglioni family were described as being attractive, which is why we have all these writings by this guy Matarazzo, who was a scholar and was like obsessed. And all of his writings, I read some of them and they're written in like very old style writing, obviously, so I'm not going to read them to you guys, but it was basically like, oh, Astore, his chin was that of a god and his sinewy arms were holding the reins of his horse. And so everybody thought they were super attractive and ferocious and powerful, which they were. And so this story that kind of took on a life of its own, this battle that displayed the heroism of the Baglioni clan, was heard by Raphael, and he was like, okay, well, I'm going to paint St. George in a battle, and I'm going to paint the tale of the expulsion of Heliodorus, and he used Astore kind of as his model.
Okay. All right.
So basically what I'm trying to tell you is that Astore Baglioni was hot, ripped, rich, and brave, and as a close family member of Gianpaolo Baglioni, the young single man seemed the perfect selection for the arranged marriage that we're about to talk about. The bride, named Lavinia Colonna, was a distant relative from the city of Rome. Just distant enough that the wedding wouldn't be an act of incest, but close enough that her lineage could be traced back to the side of the family that Griffonetto Baglioni came from. And Griffonetto, remember, is the guy that keeps having beef with Astore and Gianpaolo. Everyone hoped that this wedding would bring the feuding family members back together and show the people of Perugia that the ruling family was strong and united. This would have another added benefit to it, as a peaceful wedding would help keep enemies outside the city from thinking that there was anything wrong happening within the Baglioni household. Because if there was gossip to reach outside people, the Baglionis were worried that people would think they were an easy target and come in and try to overthrow them, just like the previous story I told you about. In the summer of the year 1500, Astore Baglioni and Lavinia Colonna were finally scheduled to be wed, with festivities beginning the 28th of July. During this time, weddings were long, multi-day events full of processions, feasts, and ceremonies, but while most in the family were optimistic about the union, Griffonetto was busy plotting. In the book The Story of Perugia by Margaret Simons and Lena Duff Gordon, The wedding festivities are described as follows, quote, Perugia was turned into a veritable garden of loveliness on this occasion. Rich velvets, brocades, tapestries hung from the palace windows, their gorgeous colors mingled with long trails of ivy, with many shrubs and the branches of blossoming trees, which also filled the streets. Colossal arches spanned the roads at the different gates of the city. All vied together to erect the finest arch, and one was hung all over with tapestries showing the military exploits of the young Astore. As the Roman bride passed in, the ladies of Perugia went to meet her, offering her rich presents. Some were dressed in cloth of gold and silver, others in silk and velvet, and many of them were lovely to behold. But Lavinia Colonna exceeded them all by the glory of her embroidered gown and by the pearls and jewels twisted into her hair. Simonetto Baglioni rode around the city in a decorated chariot led by his horses, throwing handfuls of sugared treats to the cheering crowd. He was doing everything he could to make the day joyful and festive, putting on a show for the citizens of Perugia that the Baglioni family would soon be united by love and friendship. But not everyone was celebrating. There were certain Perugian neighborhoods that disliked the ostentatious displays of the Baglioni, whom they saw as douchebags. Some of them had even heard rumors that something terrible was about to happen to the wedding party. And if it did, they thought, who cares? The Baglioni were nothing more than a group of violent tyrants anyway. On the very first night of the wedding celebrations, a violent storm broke out. The decorations were torn apart by the wind, and the storm was so fierce that it frightened many. And some Perugians worried that the storm was a bad omen of things to come. Lavinia, the new bride, trembled when over the roar of the storm she heard the deep and menacing growls of the Baglioni family's lions. Yes, you heard that right. The Baglioni family kept lions in iron cages on their property, and there are several historical accounts that tell the tale of these lions roaring and echoing throughout the city at night, something which served as a constant reminder that the Baglionis were powerful and not to be fucked with.
That is super scary and weird.
Apparently this was common during the Renaissance period. Like, if you were a rich enough family and you were in charge of one of these city-states, it was kind of common to have your miniature zoo of just lions hanging out in iron cages so that people could see them and hear them and be like, oh my God, I'm not going to attack that family because they've got lions.
Yeah. I remember Allie and I went to LMU and our mascot was a lion. And sometimes randomly throughout the year, there would be like a cage with a real lion in it. I thought it was like, you know what? Look, guys, I'm from Oklahoma. We don't really have animal rights there. I was a vegetarian. I was super into animals, but I saw the lion in the cage and thought, that's cool. I'm going to take a picture with the lion in the cage. But apparently some other people at the school had the foresight to see that it was kind of fucked up. And they were like, actually, we don't want to do this anymore. We don't want the lion in the cage. And so I just remember that being the first time that I was like, am I like fucked up? Because like I saw the lion in the cage and it like never even occurred to me to be like, maybe he doesn't want to be in the cage. Like I was just like, that's so cool. There's a lion.
But I know back in the day, we had a permanent lion in a cage at LMU.
Oh, we did?
Like way back in the day in history. It was the MGM lion.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
so all of the opening shots where there's that lion roaring,
Rawr.
that lion was kept at LMU. And so, yeah, I think maybe that was also kind of part of a dick measuring contest of like, look at us, we're so LA that we have the MGM lion on our property.
Yeah.
And similarly, some of these families, I'm like trying to bring it back to the story. Some of these stories of super rich city-state families that were in charge had lions and they were like, yep, this shows that we mean business. But even though the lion's roars and the powerful storm outside frightened Lavinia, she never could have imagined what was to come. She and Astore were both staying in the palace of Griffonetto Baglioni, who, although they didn't know it yet, was planning to betray them. Griffonetto and several of his closest family members were planning on murdering Astore in cold blood as he slept, in order to prevent the wedding from taking place, shattering any illusions of a peaceful and united family, and hopefully also killing, or at least running out of town, Gianpaolo and all of his side of his family. Once those members of the family were exiled, Griffonetto thought that he would finally be able to take over Perugia. The night of August 14th, 1500, was chosen as the night that Griffonetto Baglioni and his band of goons would strike. Taking their positions around the palace, they waited for their signal. A large stone was to be dropped into the courtyard of the palace, and that would be the signal that the massacre was to begin. Once it fell, each of the conspirators was to run straight to the bedroom of the relative they had been assigned to kill. 2 leaders and 15 hired thugs were assigned to each victim. They brought battering rams and crowbars in case doors were locked, and everything went exactly as planned. The stone crashed down, the conspirators sprang into action, and the murder spree began. Astore Baglioni was asleep in bed at Griffonetto's house, with his bride beside him. As an assassin crept up to the side of the bed and raised a knife above him, the knife was plunged down into Astore's chest. Astore obviously woke up from this and began to fight back, but he had already lost too much blood. As his bride looked on, holding him as he bled to death, Astore cried out, "Wretched Astore, who dies like a coward." Meanwhile, Simonetto Baglioni leapt to his feet and grabbed his weapons, shouting to his brother, "Don't be afraid, my brother. Hold on." But Simonetto was killed soon after. In a particularly savage act, one of the attackers, named Filippo da Braccio, cut open Simonetto's side. Digging his hands deep into Simonetto's torso, he laughed as he tore out Simonetto's ribs and ripped out his entrails. Finally, Filippo reached in and pulled out Simonetto's still beating heart, holding it up in front of his face as blood spurted from the arteries. Holding it right in front of Simonetto as his eyes closed for the last time, Filippo then savagely bit into the heart and ate it whole. Meanwhile, Astore's father, Guido, was attacked in his bed. Waking up to find himself stabbed through the chest and bleeding out, his final words were, "I guess now my time has come." Next, they came for Simonetto's brother, Gismondo. Pinned down and unable to fight back, Gismondo had his throat cut while he lay with his head turned away, trying not to see his own murder. After the killings, the naked bodies of Astore and Simonetto were thrown into the street. Hearing the commotion, crowds soon gathered around, stunned by the spectacle. According to Matarazzo, who wrote of the scene, the bodies of Astore and Simonetto, even in death, were beautiful, proud, and stoic, like statues of ancient Roman warriors. Thieves soon converged on the scene, hoping to steal the rings and jewelry off the dead bodies of the men, and several began hacking with knives at the fingers. But they were soon stopped by horrified onlookers, and the bodies were buried quickly in unmarked graves the same day.
That one guy that just like opened up his side and grabbed his heart out and just ate it while it was still beating. My first reaction to that was like, is that kind of Sigma though?
What is Sigma? You keep saying this and I don't know what it is.
Sigma is like, it can't be described. It can't be taught honestly. It just is. Like you know, yeah.
Okay. So so I can't answer your question. I don't know if it's Sigma. I don't know if it's Alpha. I don't know if it's Beta. I don't know if it's Omega. All I know is that it's fucked up. And some people say, look, there's no evidence actually that this happened, and probably authors that wrote about it kind of went over the top throughout history because they were really trying to drive home that Griffonetto was in the wrong. But I don't really care what happened. Griffonetto was definitely in the wrong.
Yeah. See, it's really hard for me to like follow this story because all of the names are like Pinocchio, you know? And so I'm like, who the fuck are these people? Like, I thought, wasn't Simonetto the one, or no, who was the one that, Astoria? Wasn't Astoria the one that came out with his dick and balls before he could shave and was like killing people?
No, that was Simonetto.
Oh, Simonetto.
So basically, here, I'm just going to quick overview for people who aren't reading these words, because I think it's easier for me to follow because I read the names of the people to myself while I was writing. So there's a town in central Italy called Perugia.
Yeah.
In that town, they are governed by the Baglioni family.
Yeah.
It's spelled a little bit like bologna.
Yeah, okay.
It's a little bit.
The
So we can
Baglioni
call them the
family.
Balonies, okay? So the Baglioni family has a bunch of people in it. Because they're rich and birth control doesn't exist, they have a lot of kids. Okay, these kids go off to have their own kids, blah, blah, blah. It's a very complex family tree. There's tons of them. And the guy who is kind of rising to the top, kind of the head dog in charge, is this guy named Gianpaolo. Gianpaolo is killing it. He is awesome. He's getting all the power and becoming almost like his own king, even though there weren't kings in this sort of political dynamic. He's basically the king or president of Perugia at this point.
Sigma.
And okay. And this guy, Griffonetto, is also in the Baglioni family, but he's in a different branch of the family tree than Gianpaolo. Okay. And he's seeing Gianpaolo get all this attention and all these bitches and
and he's jealous.
He's killing it. And he's jealous. And he's also thinking to himself, why can't I be in Gianpaolo's position? I'm just as rich. I have the exact same family last name. I'm just as hot. I'm just as cool. Why is he getting all the bitches and not me? Why is he getting all the power and not me? So seeing this faction forming, these two elders in the Baglioni family are like, all right, historically, what have we done anytime there's infighting? People get married. And then people feel like we're all one big happy family. And we're all one. We're united because my 15th cousin married your 15th cousin. And so it's not technically incest, but technically it's my family and your family getting married. And so now we're friends and we love each other. And isn't that wonderful? So these elders are like, great, we're going to take Astore, who's this badass who is known to have inspired Raphael to paint works. Like he's basically, if you're going to paint a picture of a saint, you're using Astore's beautiful chiseled face and abs as your inspiration.
He's a model.
Simonet, he's a model.
Yeah, like a it guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's young, he's single, he's hot, and he's good at battle. And then he has a relative named Simonetto, who was the guy with the dick and balls waving in the wind, jumped out age 18 of a window with a sword and was like, I'm going to kill these people that are trying to kill my family, and succeeds and gets 22 flesh wounds, but none actually kill him, even though he's a baby. He's just an 18-year-old because that's how divine he is. Right. As this wedding is being planned between Astore and this chick from Rome, who technically is related to Griffonetto, Griffonetto's like, oh, they think this is going to end my obsession, but it's not. I'm actually going to take advantage of everyone being in the same place at the same time, and I'm going to have my own hired goons and my weird uncle who was described as a bastard and was whispering in Griffonetto's ear about hey, why aren't you in charge? Why is Gianpaolo in charge? How come Astore is getting attention? How come Simonetto, they're talking about his dick and balls? Why not yours? And so he's like, great, I'm going to get all these people. I'm going to kill my family members that I don't like. And then I'm going to be the new Gianpaolo. So that happens. Everyone dies except for Gianpaolo, as we're about to get into. And Griffonetto is like, great, I ran Gianpaolo out of town. Everybody else is killed. It's got to be me now. I'm the big dog on campus now, and I'm about to take over. Okay, back to our story. So, like I just said, even though Gianpaolo was one of the intended targets, he managed to escape. When Griffonetto and another conspirator stormed into his home, his servant, Miralia, blocked them with a giant spear while her master Gianpaolo fled up the stairs, which is kind of badass.
She decided to die for her master? Well, I guess if she didn't, then she would get killed
They didn't kill her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they didn't kill her. They didn't kill any of the women because they're like, that's where our code of honor starts. We're going to murder in cold blood our own family, but we're gentlemen and we're going to just let these ladies live out their horrific lives with the threat of disembowelment if they don't marry. So Gianpaolo flees up the staircase of his home. He jumps from rooftop to rooftop, parkouring himself over walls and bushes, and eventually he breaks into the house of a bunch of students. And they're described as foreign students, but I couldn't figure out what country or area they were from. And these students are terrified because this sweaty man has just burst through their attic window. And they're kind of poor. There's a lot of them living in the house, and they're like, oh my God, don't kill me. Oh my God, wait a minute, it's Gianpaolo, the hot guy that's in charge of our city-state. And so they feel compelled, even though they're scared, to give him food and shelter. They disguise him in a student's robe, and at dawn, they help him flee the city. Meanwhile, Griffonetto is pumped, and he's ready to take over the town. So he starts making plans that he's going to be the new Gianpaolo. Gianpaolo makes his way to the nearby city of Marciano, where one of his other brothers is there waiting. And from there, he immediately returns to Perugia, determined to take revenge. While this was happening, Griffonetto's mom, Atalanta, fled the city along with his wife Zenobia and the 2 young sons of Gianpaolo who weren't able to escape with their father. Their names were Malatesta and Orazio. All of these people went to the nearby town of Landona, and Griffonetto is like, wait a minute, why did my mom flee? Shouldn't she know? Like, she's always been my number 1 cheerleader. I'm a boy. She's a boy mom. I'm her, like, number 1 special guy. Like, she was also telling me I was super special and should be in Gianpaolo's place. Why is she fleeing? So he tries to go find his mom. And when he goes there, he's knocking on the door and he's like, Mommy, why have you forsaken me? And she shouts down at him from her window. She's like, you are dead to me, Griffonetto. I refuse to talk to you. I am so pissed off about the murders. I'm so pissed off that you betrayed our family. And he shouts back up at her like, but Mom, remember you gave me the idea in the first place, Mom. And she is said to have uttered a curse upon him and turns him away from her house. This curse haunted Griffonetto deeply. With many of the murders having failed and his co-conspirators fleeing the city, he was now left completely alone. Crushed with guilt and fear, when Gianpaolo returned to Perugia for his revenge, Griffonetto didn't hide. He went into the public square to face him head-on. Gianpaolo walked up to him, held his gleaming sword to Griffonetto's throat, and looked him dead in the eye, saying, "Are you really here, Griffonetto? Then go in peace. I will not kill you. I won't stain my hands with the blood of my own kin as you have done." He then removed his sword from Griffonetto's throat, turned, and walked away. Gianpaolo left Griffonetto to be killed by his guards, who, according to the guy that was obsessed with Gianpaolo and Astore and his family, said that Griffonetto was hacked into pieces.
Ugh.
Matarazzo, which is the guy that was obsessed, writes, quote, this is what I mean. I think this guy might be who you're talking about when you're like, oh, people that get turned on by violence. I think that we may have found the original guy to be infected with this illness. Wrote that, quote, Griffonetto's body was so beautiful and noble that even in death, it was a tragedy to behold, end quote. So basically, like, what a bummer that this hot piece of ass was hacked to pieces. Yeah. As Griffonetto lay dying and bleeding in the city square, his mother and his wife arrived on the scene. The city was stunned into silence. People stepped aside, ashamed to be seen, as the grieving women approached. No one wanted to be linked to the killing now. As his mother knelt beside her dying son, she stopped crying and instead prayed over him and told him to forgive those who had hurt him. Griffonetto was too weak to speak, but he nodded, and she gave him her blessing. He reached out and pressed his hand into hers, and then he died. The same mother who had cursed him now wept and blessed him as he passed away. After Griffonetto was dead and the rest of the co-conspirators had fled, Gianpaolo took full control of Perugia. He had more than 100 people executed in the city square and even inside the cathedral, anyone who he suspected of being involved in Griffonetto's plot. Then he ordered the cathedral washed with wine and consecrated again to purify it from the bloodshed. He had the heads of the traitors nailed to the walls of the palazzo and their portraits painted upside down in a fresco, which was a common way to publicly shame the dead in Italy at the time. He moved into what was left of the family homes, draped the great halls in black cloth, and had all of his servants wear mourning clothing. The city was devastated. The people of Perugia, who had only been bystanders to the slaughter, now had to live with the aftermath. After the massacre, the history of the Baglioni family continued, but it was marked by more and more violence, betrayal, and tragedy. It felt as if the family had been cursed. No matter how powerful they became, their story kept ending in bloodshed. The men who survived the original betrayal, like Giampaolo, went on to play major roles in Italian politics and warfare. Giampaolo became famous throughout Italy for being a brilliant military leader and a skilled ruler, but people were afraid of him. Yes, he won battles, led troops for the Pope, and even governed Perugia for a time with strength and order, but all of that success came at a terrible price. He had only survived because his relatives had been murdered. He had taken revenge with ruthless force, he had spilled the blood of fellow citizens, turned churches into execution sites, and ruled by fear. His rise to power was built on betrayal, on the death of his own cousins, uncles, and brothers, and in that sense, even his achievements were haunted by the family's crimes. The violence didn't end there. The younger generation, the children of Giampaolo who had escaped, Malatesta and Orazio, grew up to be just as deadly. They became famous soldiers too, but also committed brutal acts of their own. Orazio ended up murdering his own cousin in a bid for more power, and eventually the Pope would jail him for being too violent. Malatesta was less violent than Orazio, but ended up betraying his allies in Florence during a different battle, earning him the nickname the Troublemaker Traitor. The family's name, which was once associated with beauty and nobility, came to be linked with chaos, revenge, betrayal, and murder. This is why many writers and historians of the time, like Matarazzo, wrote about the Baglioni not just as historical figures, but almost like characters in a dark legend. A family that was doomed to destroy itself from within. They lived in luxury, fought like heroes, and even looked like gods. But in the end, their own pride and violence consumed them. Might their downfall have been linked to the evil eye, or malocchio, cast upon them by people who were jealous of their success? Or was it just a case of a little bit of power turning into a lot of power and then driving people crazy? Who is to say? And that is the story of the real Red Wedding, aka the curse of the Baglioni family and the Baglioni Massacre of Renaissance Italy.
Wow. Wow. That was insane. I'm definitely going to be like up at 3 a.m. reading Wikipedias about that. I'm going to be like typing into Google like Baglioni family, Italy, Pinocchio story. Great story. You know what kind of sticks out to me is that one guy was branded a troublemaker, right? And did you know that Jake Paul's name, like when he steps into the ring, is Troublemaker?
Jake Paul?
Yeah. I think he's called. No, never mind. It's not. It's the problem kid. Never mind. I fucked up. All right. Not relevant. Okay. Look, I was trying to relate it back.
Well, Malatesta, his name means troublemaker. Like some of the interpretations, like some of the translations, like Mala is bad, Testa is head. And so people just outright called him the troublemaker traitor because he betrayed one of his allies during a subsequent war. But it's kind of a crazy story because it shows how maybe some of these superstitions, like wedding superstitions or the evil eye, might not have been so superstitious. Because here's this powerful family that was trying to do what they thought was the right thing to make peace, have this wedding, this joyous occasion, and they didn't even get a chance to really enjoy the wedding because, maybe the evil eye took over, and that's why the bad stuff happened.
I think the evil eye is real. That is one thing I do believe. Like if you go to my Instagram, I have the evil eye in my profile. Like whenever I like post something of like something that makes me proud or I'm happy about it, I'll put like an evil eye somewhere on the photo or whatever. Cause I do think that there's an element of like haters, like people wanting to see you fail, like somehow can get on you if you're not careful. As much as I want to be like, no, like fuck the haters, like whatever, you know, I think it's true. I think being in the public eye exposes you to a lot of like envy and bad energy, and you know, and I think maybe that is what happened here. It's like a story of jealousy where there doesn't need to be jealousy. Like we're joining families. Like, you know, ideally, if you think I'm so great or whatever, you're about to be in my family, you know, even more.
Yeah.
Why not see my success and be inspired by it and get close to me? You know, why not? Why try to eliminate me? Because that's not going to eliminate the feeling that you have, which is inadequacy, you know? It's just going to manifest somewhere else in your life once I'm gone. Yeah, I think it's actually like a really deep story.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's also kind of crazy that the red wedding scene from Game of Thrones like may have been based on this. Now, here's another little layer because this is an event that really happened. We can debate the details of it because there were different writers writing about it during different time periods. Did the story take on a life of its own? Did embellishments get added? We may never know because obviously we weren't there in the 1400s in Perugia. But you remember how I said that a story was used as almost the model for these paintings by Raphael.
Yeah.
So when you were looking at the first one, which shows him on a fat horse and he has a sword raised and he's looking down in pity on this creature beneath him, that creature sort of resembles a griffin, some people think.
Okay.
Do you know what a griffin is? Gryffindor.
Oh,
it's
a
like
dragon.
yeah, it's like it's a creature that has kind of a bird head and wings and a long tail and the feet of a lion. Well, that creature sort of resembles this dragon that's being slain by a story. And do you know what griffonetto means in Italian?
A griffin?
Little griffin or young griffin.
Oh.
So in this painting that has a person modeled after a story killing a dragon that kind of also resembles a griffin. A story was killed by Griffonetto, but in the end, Gianpaolo got the best of Griffonetto. I don't know. It's kind of like prophetic that this painting that was painted prior to this massacre happening maybe shows what was to come. Maybe, life imitates art.
That's so haunted. Yeah.
Right? Like, did this happen because it was painted to happen?
It was foretold. The prophecy. It's giving prophecy, perhaps.
Perhaps.
Wow. I don't know, man. I don't know. And also the horse is white, which has like a symbol of, purity and all of that. This is interesting to me, this story. I like it. I like it a lot because it's got a lot of like hot guys doing battle and stuff. And like when I think of men, I like to like reduce them to that, to just like abs and dicks like with swords fighting each other,
What do you think of the mom cursing her own son too when Griffonetto is like, wait, mom, why are you fleeing the city? I wasn't going to kill you. I thought I was doing what you wanted me to do. And then she's like, I curse you. And then as he's like dying hacked to death, she comes back and is like, I forgive you. Like, is there something kind of like she's playing both sides to you? That's how I felt reading this story. She's like feeding into the delusions of her son by being like, Gianpaolo ain't shit. You could definitely be in his place, baby. Like you come from my loins and you're the best, and hang out with your weird uncle with his weird ideas, my brother who is filling your head with drivel. And then, you actually carried out the plot?
Yeah, she's not a great mom.
I curse you.
Yeah, she's not. No. She's not a good mom. She should probably be in jail for several reasons, including emotional neglect, perhaps, on her child. Yeah, man. I don't know. That makes me sad, though. The thought of, like, as a mom, like, just seeing your kid hacked up in the street. But also, maybe there's just a part of her who's like, you're for sure going to hell, But, like, maybe I'm gonna try to make it less scary for you because I take pity on you. So I'm saying you're blessed now.
Yeah. Maybe she was worried about there being some sort of lineage curse on her now.
Oh.
But there was a lineage curse on Gianpaolo, which is interesting because even though he didn't originally want anybody to die, he let himself go kind of crazy after this whole thing happened and killed like 100 people and nailed their heads to stakes in some accounts and had commissioned, like paid people to paint the traitors with their faces upside down so that he could hang them in the plaza as this way of cursing them.
Yeah, and he like killed people in the cathedral and stuff. I mean, yeah, he went crazy. The Italians are serious. I saw on Reddit when Mussolini was taken down, they like put his body in like a plaza and everyone just like was desecrating his body for a really long time, for like a week after his death and stuff. Like maybe there's something to be said. Like the Italians are not to be fucked with.
Now, who is to say? I did tell this story to an Italian friend of mine, and she was like, makes sense. Like, she's like, my super Italian family, like, this seems like something
that would happen.
that makes, yeah, she was like not shocked at all. She's like, and then what happened? Oh, he like nailed their heads to a pike? Yeah, checks out.
Yeah,
you
my
know?
friend Chris is very Italian, and yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, this is very, yeah, yeah. There's a like revenge, like a level of like people needing to atone for something. There is a moral compass that I feel like is a part of Italian culture, especially with like the Catholic background that, you know, is in a lot of Italian culture. There is like this element of fairness, like justice, right? Having to, like, an undercurrent of justice that sort of has to permeate everything. And usually that justice is given to God. But like in this situation, they sort of like took it into their own hands rather than letting God have it. And then maybe that's why they were punished, if we wanted to get real like AP English with it.
Oh no, for sure. Oh, I do want to get AP English about it because I think that brings us back to the beginning, which is the Renaissance was all about earthly pleasures.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas the previous era that came before it was about making sure your soul was set for the afterlife. So as we're having this story take place during this time of changing attitudes, maybe we could say the curse was indulging in some of these earthly pleasures a little bit too much,
Right.
wanting that power and having it go to your head. I don't know, rather than recognizing that that shit doesn't really matter and your soul might be cursed for all of eternity. Now, the last aspect of this story that's kind of haunted is some people think that the bride, Lavinia Colonna, who was getting married into this branch of the Baglioni family, some people think that her cassone was cursed. Her marital chest that she came with may have been cursed, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And the interesting thing about her marital chest is that it has never been found. People don't know what happened to it, and that's kind of unusual for such a prominent, rich family. But there have been these reproductions that people thought were real, and then later they're like, wait, this can't be real. So I'll send you a picture of one of them.
Oh, this looks very haunted. This is like, yeah, like a beautiful trunk. Now, what's different about this compared to the other ones we saw is that this one's not really painted on the outside. This one looks sort of ominous.
Yeah, and that would be contrary to the time period. So that's why a lot of people think this is not the wedding chest that would have belonged or been used by Lavinia Colonna, because it should have been more ornate. So this one, it's pretty. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's carved. It has filigree or whatever you want to call it. You know, those little embellishments that are all swirly.
Yeah,
But
like molding on the side or whatever they call it, like crown molding. It's beautiful, yeah, but it has like a completely different vibe than the other ones. The other ones looked like they had been painted, you know, with scenes and had like gold ornate furnishings on them. This one is wooden. It kind of looks like something that would be on the Titanic. It looks like a different time period.
it kind of looks like, some people say, maybe it was unfinished. And why would an unfinished cassone have been given to a woman unless they thought her wedding was also going to be unfinished?
Can you guys see the shocked face I'm making right now?
It almost looks like the bare bones of what could have been a beautiful cassone
Wow.
had it been painted with panels afterwards.
Oh.
So if this is the real cassone, as many have alleged that it was even held in a museum for a time before they were like, no, actually, I don't think that this could have been the cassone because it doesn't match. It looks like it was built too soon. And also it doesn't have these panels on it. So no, actually, we don't think that this is her wedding chest anymore. But if it was, as people originally thought, I don't know. Could it have been again, another situation of life imitating art? This chest is unfinished, which caused the marriage to become unfinished, or is the chest unfinished because somebody knew on some level that the wedding was never going to take place? Like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, the cassone or the murder of the groom?
I'm gonna say the cassone is cursed, obviously. I mean, it's so obvious. All of the signs lead back to this unfinished cassone, which is clear. Um, it's a what are the word I'm looking for? It's a token. It's a representation of the unfinished life, and yeah, that's what cursed them. In the same way that the painting of the fat horse with the guy on it killing the griffin foretold of Pinocchio stabbing Griffio or whatever his name was. This unfinished artwork has somehow cursed the family as well.
Exactly.
Wow.
I don't know. And did that bloodlust trickle down to other members of the family, and the whole family fell apart? Eventually they were in ruins and they no longer ruled. And a lot of people say this was the tipping point. This was the turning point for them.
Oh my God. And then Jersey Shore, hundreds of years later, would be canceled at its peak.
Wow, there are a lot of parallels here, aren't there? So that is, like I said, the story of the Red Wedding. It is said to be a tale as old as time, power, bloodlust, love, murder, jealousy, malocchio, curses, cassone, ghosts. Where is everyone? Why is the cassone unfinished? It had a little bit of everything. So, like I said, this is not the typical type of episode we usually do. So if you guys didn't like this, don't worry. This is typically the type of stuff that I would talk about in a Allie's Miniature Haunting, but it was too long. It just had to be moved over to the public feed. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know we have some people that really like history and legends and urban legends and lore. And if we have any Italian listeners, let me know if you've heard this story before and if the version I told matches up with the version you know, or do you know some other information that I could not get in the English translations of this story?
Yeah, and if we have some Italians, let us know the inside scoop on the Jeff Bezos wedding, Lauren Sanchez wedding, whatever. Wow, Allie, great episode. I really enjoyed that. You know, I love to change things up. I like the change of pace, and I feel like I got to activate a part of my brain that hasn't been activated in a really long time. So thank you very much for that. I also loved looking at the pictures of the fat horses.
Yeah, the only saving grace for this episode that I thought might make you enjoy it is hot dudes, swords,
horses,
dicks out in the wind, and horses.
Dicks out at the wind.
I'm glad you went on this journey with me. Would you be so kind as to do our sign off?
BRB gonna go write a story about a young boy who could not even shave yet, who went outside with the balls and the dick hanging out together to slay some other men.
Bye. Welcome to the closing credits of episode 225, The Real Life Red Wedding of Perugia, Italy, aka the Baglioni Renaissance Massacre. First, I'd love to shout out my sources for this week's episode, of which there are many. My main source for this week's episode is a book called The Story of Perugia, written by Margaret Simons and Lena Duff Gordon. You can find it on readingroo.ms. That's readingroo.ms if you would also like to read it. Other sources include scholar.usc.edu article on Cassone, the Red Wedding episode from Game of Thrones, the Baglioni Family Wikipedia page, the Decameron Wikipedia page, Haunted Venice, Legends, Mysteries, and Stories, Women and Marriage in Medieval Italy by Pauline Montagna for Medium.com, Game of Thrones Parallels to Actual History on the History Forum, Weddings in the Italian Renaissance, an article uploaded to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Sartle blog, Marriage Italian Renaissance Style, Renaissance Philosophy, the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, How the Renaissance Changed the Church and Influenced the Reformation by Leslie Kennedy for History.com, The Really Real Bloody Wedding by Kathy Copeland Patton for Medium.com, a Reddit post to r/ASOIAF by user Boris Roosevelt, entitled "Today I Learned There Was a Real-Life Red Wedding in Italy in 1500, except it was even worse than in Game of Thrones." An article posted to alessandroodibaglioni.it, todayifoundout.com, an article entitled "This Day in History, July 15th, a Bloody Wedding," an article published to literaryreview.co.uk entitled "The House of Borgia" by Sarah Bradford, an article entitled "Ritual Cannibalism in Renaissance Europe" posted to the historum.com history forum. A discussion was started by a user going by the name Tercios Españoles. And that's it. Those are all my sources for this week's episode. Now it's time to shout out our donors. This month, we would love to give a warm, heartfelt thank you to our Patreon donors who donated to us in the month of May. Letters A through E. If you'd like to become a donor and hear your name shouted out on a future episode, head over to patreon.com/letsgethaunted, where you will not only get a shout out, but you'll also get access to episode extras, mini-sodes, personal hauntings, live streams, and much, much more. This week, we'd love to thank Sailor Doom, at Fredo, Ab Wally, Abigail A, Ace G, Adrian L, Amy T, Elena E, Alaya, Alea, Alberto O, Alicia L, Alicia L, Alessa M, Alessandro C, Alicia, Alicea, Alessia, Alex J G, Alex G J, Alex Q, Alex W, Alex W, Alexandria, Alexis S, Alexandria, Alice Jess Laura, Allegra B, Alan Cantation, Alonzo, Ali, Ali B, Ali's a 10, Ali Asai, Ali Asie, Amanda P, Amber F, Amber Alert 42069. Amelia, Andrew, Angela, Anne Marie T, Ann D, AP Trip, Archie F, Ard3 in Strander? Arden Strander, maybe? Artsy Starkey, Arwin S, Ashley D, Ashley J, Ashley W, Aubrey, Auburn R, Audrey W, Avery K, Bailey M, Bambi, Beatrice, Bella Q, Benjamin S, Bethany W, Billy R, Boob 42069, which gets me every fucking time. Bookshift Managed, Bradley M, Brenna L, Bree E, Brianna, Brianna, Brianna C, Brianna C, Bree P, Brielle, Brittany S, Bro Anal, Brooke, Bucket M, Kane, Caitlin D, Cal E, Camille Z Cat, Captain L C, Caroline L, Carolyn L, Cassidy M, Cassie L, Kathleen R, Celeste L, Cetus, Ketus, CG, Chatty Watty the Puddin' Patty, Chance the Reaper, Chanel C, Charles C, Charlie I, Charlie M, Cheesy, Cherry D, Chicken, Chloe L, Christina T, Christopher M, Christopher O, Christy H, Coraline, Coraline, Corruptive Jade, Courtney, Christian P, Criley, Crystal C, Cursed Gravy, Damio of the Lars Farm, Dan J, Dan the Blacksmith, Dana C, Danya SNC, Daniel D, Danny T, Daff, Desi S, DiGiorno Flocka, Dodie, Doralee N, D Rose, Echo Rain, Ed, Erica A. Thank you all so much for donating to our show in the month of May 2025. We are extremely grateful for all of you. Stuff has been a little bit crazy this year. We're making lots of adjustments, trying to figure out how to get more efficient to you guys, how to get you guys even more content on Patreon. We're doing our very, very best, and I'm very excited because this month, which is my birthday month, whoop whoop, I'm going to be restarting my live streams. See you guys on there for those of you who enjoy my gaming live streams. And for those of you who don't know, each week on every photo dump for every episode at Let's Get Haunted on Instagram, you can comment a secret password. We tell you what the secret password is at the very end of every single episode, and commenting that secret password earns you 1 entry into the end of the year raffle. You can enter each week on each photo dump if you comment the correct combination of words or phrases or whatever the password is that week. And yeah, sometimes you win cool stuff. So the password for this week that you will comment at Let's Get Haunted on Instagram on the photo dump for this week's episode is, what does Sigma mean? See you guys next week. Bye.